It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome, welcome. It is the Jill on Money show. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. We are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios, Capital One. This is Banking Reimagined. What's in your wallet? Well, we've got a little bit of a change up in the way we're doing the show today. We've got a guest in this hour, the first hour. Her name is Teresa Ghilarducci. She is a labor economist and a nationally recognized expert in retirement security. She was kind enough to spend some time with us. Let's just start in with what is the state of the labor market? Here's our interview with Teresa Ghilarducci. Over the last 3-4 months, we've had almost 50 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits. It's just a mind-boggling number. So how would you characterize the current labor market?
We economists are wondering whether or not this is just an artifact of the virus and the shutdown we need because the virologists tell us that this is the way to curb the virus, and that we're just pausing an otherwise healthy economy. And when we have a vaccine or good therapeutics, we're going to snap back right to where we were. Or there was underlying weakness in our economy before we got here. And what the COVID shutdown is doing is just exposing those weaknesses. And when we come back from the pandemic, we are going to have much higher rates of unemployment. So the unemployment numbers are the highest we've seen since the Great Depression. But are they real? Are they permanent? We're finding that for older workers, for instance, many of these will be permanent job losses. And we find millions of people in their 50s who are working who are on a very rocky off-ramp to retirement or to a world of very uncertain work. And that's the population that we're looking at. What is that off-ramp from full-time career work, to the next chapter? And this recession with these unemployment numbers have completely changed what that off-ramp looks like.
Now, prior to the pandemic, it was seemingly good news for older employees that, people were going back to work and there were some people who were working longer. And if I recall, in the 2008-2009 downturn, didn't older workers fare better during that recession? What explains that now?
Great memory. So what is fascinating about this recession is that older workers aren't as insulated as they were in the great financial recession, that recession of 2008-2009. Now, older workers in that recession had lower unemployment rates than the younger workers. That's for sure. But if they did lose their jobs, Jill, they had a much longer time getting another job. And if they got another job, it paid about 25% less. So yes, the rates were lower than younger workers, but the implications of being unemployed were worse for older workers then. In this recession, we discovered that older workers don't have the traditional advantages, that older workers who are specially educated have higher unemployment rates than younger educated workers in this recession. We think it's because it has to do with the industries that have been hard hit. Industries that have been hard hit are, of course, leisure and hospitality. We all know that, but also healthcare and education services. Healthcare, not because we don't have a need for doctors, but a lot of elective surgeries and a lot of elective visits to healthcare offices were postponed. Think dentist offices or surgery centers. All those were flatlined in the last quarter and the second quarter especially. We think the reason why older workers are really hard hit by this unemployment numbers is because they have two bad choices. Older workers can work, and because this virus hits older people much worse than younger people because of I learned a fancy new word, immunosenescence. It
Mm.
means your immune system just starts to decline. And even though we run and eat our vegetables and brush our teeth, doing everything right, older people, and this starts around 40 to 50, just lose their pep. Their immune system lose their pep. And this is why the virus particularly affects older people worse. Older people are more at risk in going back to work. Now, some jobs don't require as much human interaction, or some jobs have a component that can be done at work, but most jobs need to be done with either customers or coworkers. And because more protection is needed because of them, they may be perceived as more expensive, Jill,
Hmm.
in coming back to work in this recession.
So if you
Um,
think about all those people who are collecting unemployment, so I guess that, 18 million
mhm,
people who are collecting unemployment benefits, and it looked to me like there were 18 million, but then another 15 million under the
mhm,
pandemic unemployment assistance. So the plan for gig workers. If you look at all those jobs, and we look at the impact on older workers, and by the way, when we say older workers, everyone, like, I feel like I'm one of those older workers. So let's,
mhm,
like, anyone over 50, let's just say, what percentage or raw numbers do you think are just not coming
yeah.
back?
We have 137 million people who are in the labor force in America. So 137 souls in America are either working or looking for work. A good many of them, 47, almost 50 million of them are workers over 50. Jill, let's take a step back. Older workers, workers over 50, are the fastest growing group in our labor market. So when we think about how powerful the US labor market is, think about an older person with gray hair.
Hmm.
It's because of the baby boomers. The boomers are more educated than their parents before them, and there's so many of them. Now, the millennials, or about 70 million of them, are in their 20s and 30s, but many of them are still in school or not quite in the labor force yet. So the fastest growing group are over 50. So if you want productivity, if you want power in the US economy, you need to pay attention to these older workers. So those 50 million of them, we actually think 20% of them won't go back to work.
Oof.
Yeah, it's because they're disproportionately in jobs that are at risk of being permanently reshuffled or redone. And they're disproportionately in jobs that are essential work or frontline jobs that are essentially more dangerous. Older workers don't seem to be more likely to be in jobs that will allow you to work away from home. Again, think of education and healthcare workers. You can't do that kind of service work, in your back bedroom.
We'll get back to our interview with Teresa Ghilarducci in just a minute. During the break, why don't you do something for me? Go to JillOnMoney.com and check out some of the things that are going on there. We've got this new furry fan club. Send me pictures of your dogs or your cats. We'd love to see that. We're a family here at Jill on Money. So join the family. Another way to join the family is to subscribe to our sister broadcast. It's a podcast, and it's called Jill on Money. So you can do that also. Just go to our website, JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And if you want to figure out a way to better manage your financial life and you need some help, why don't you ask us for that help? It's kind of cool because you can do it a little bit under the radar. You can be anonymous if you want. If you have a very distinct voice, I guess that Mark could figure out some way to shield that voice. But really, no one's going to really know who you are. Make up a name, it's fine. And send us an email and we'll be able to help you out. That email is very easy to remember. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. And if you're on the website, by the way, which you should be, JillOnMoney.com, there's also a contact button, so you can just click that and get to us. We are so delighted to have our guest today, Teresa Ghilarducci. Specifically, I love her because she's very, very smart, but she doesn't hit you over the head with how smart she is. She is a labor economist. She is a nationally recognized expert in retirement security. I met her because she had written a book. She co-wrote a book. What was his name? What's his name, Mark? Tony James, that's right. And they wrote a book called Rescuing Retirement. So Tony James was the co-author, the executive vice chairman of Blackstone Group, which is unbelievable to me. Anyway, she joined us. We did a remote interview, and in this part of our interview, we are going to talk about the thing that so many of you ask about, which is you're nearing retirement and what you should be thinking about. So, pre-retirees out there, which may be all of you, frankly, because we're all going to retire at some point, whether we want to or not, I guess. Just check this out because her approach is really important. Here's more of our interview with Teresa Ghilarducci. 10 million people, that's huge.
Yes,
Some of
yes,
those people were not prepared to retire.
yeah,
I don't even know what to say
yeah,
about that. It's like breathtaking. So, what's
yeah.
the advice that we're giving these people?
I share your breathlessness. We know that the people that were approaching retirement at age 65 were not prepared. And so our policies were trying to get more money in their retirement account, try to spend less, try to find jobs if they've been involuntarily retired, kind of laid off, pushed out by their career work, to try to stay in the labor force with part-time jobs, also to delay collecting Social Security. Now we have that same advice, Jill. Cut your spending, try to save more if you can at the same time, delay collecting Social Security, try to get some kind of a part-time job. And now we're saying that to people who are younger. So delaying Social Security is not a matter of 1 or 2 years, but 8. Try to get a part-time job in an economy where 20% of the people, if we count it right, are unemployed. That's just a ridiculous kind of advice.
Mm-hmm.
And save more is also ridiculous advice. So us financial advisors, personal financial advisors, really have a lot of pointless stuff to tell a person to do. What I lean to is to say, remember, the government is a really important partner, an important partner in your retirement security. And make sure when you vote that you vote to maintain your Medicare,
Mm.
perhaps lower the Medicare age to age 50. This may become a really important campaign issue. If we lowered the Medicare age to 50, all these older workers who are losing their jobs and their health insurance may find a lot of refuge in going to Medicare and not having to go on the exchanges, which are very, very expensive, 5 times more costly to get a policy than for younger workers. So as a personal advice, and that's where you rest and I rest there too, we find that older workers, these millions, are facing really hard choices.
Mm.
I want to maybe speak to your listeners who are older, who are afraid of getting sick on the job, but still have a job. My advice to them is to really get a hazmat suit or do whatever you can to make going to work safer for you, but don't quit your job because of the health risks. There are a lot of ways to go to work that will make it safer. Do all that. Maybe even go overboard, but don't quit your job because you're afraid of the virus.
It seems like such a Hobbesian choice here. So that's what it gets very scary, of course. I'm wondering how you feel about some of the relief for retirement accounts that were enacted as part of the response to COVID. How do you feel about the idea that there is no early distribution penalty on a retirement account or the beefing up of loans? What's your view on that?
We in the retirement world thought that was just awful,
Mm.
just to put a fine point on it. Now is not the time to encourage people to withdraw from their retirement accounts. I think it's almost elitist proposal because people who are well off will not withdraw from their retirement accounts, and they'll be able to keep their money in those retirement accounts and take advantage of now what we're seeing are increases in the stock market. People who took money out of their accounts in March and April took money out of their accounts when the asset values were at their lowest level. We had a Congress that said, we're going to encourage you to sell low. And then if they come back into the market, they'll buy high. This is just the opposite of the advice we give to people, selling low, buying high. Congress opened up the floodgates for people who were most desperate to do just that. Congress should have said, hey, we want to preserve your retirement accounts. They could have had a whole system of emergency loans available from the Treasury Department. They could have actually increased the stimulus checks. Maybe for some people, it should have been $2,000. So I'm sad that Congress passed that legislation.
What is it that you think? I know you've written so much about retirement. You study this. You wrote that fabulous book with Tony James called Rescuing Retirement, which I loved. What do you think has to happen in terms of the way this country looks at retirement in light of the fact that we have now had two pretty awful recessions within a decade, essentially? What should happen next?
Oh, Jill, that's such a good question. Look, we have these crises as if they're big surprises. We have them about every 10 years. And the fact that they're repeating, if it's not COVID, it's going to be home mortgages, it's going to be something else. These are times that really put the retirement system in focus. So what has to happen is in the stimulus plans, we have to focus on older workers and retirees. They were ignored in these last stimulus plans. And that makes no sense since this virus and recession are really impacting older workers the most and their retirement security. What should happen is that the next stimulus bill helps businesses put money aside for their employees. So as small business is encouraged to use their Paycheck Protection Program money to keep their workers on the payroll, we should also forgive loans where the small businesses put federal money into the retirement accounts of small business. That would really help shore up the retirement accounts for the 63 million American workers that don't have anything, because most of them work for small business. Number two, we have to pay attention to older workers' insecurity for health insurance. Drop the Medicare age to age 50. Number three, we have to use the Social Security system to prevent poverty among older workers. We can boost the bottom benefit, called raising the minimum benefit, and it doesn't cost that much to bring everybody who's over 65 out from under the poverty line, to move them above the poverty line. That would be good for the economy because they would have more spending money, and it would also be good morally.
We'll get back to our interview with Teresa Ghilarducci in just a minute. Hey, when you have a little bit of time, right now during our break, go to the website, jillonmoney.com, and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. It's free every single week, and it's great. jillonmoney.com, the free weekly newsletter. Okay, we'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And we are here to help you take the mystery out of your financial life, out of anything in your financial life. So many questions. Today, we're pretty focused on retirement and on the labor market in general because we have a special guest. Her name is Teresa Ghilarducci. When we were talking to her, we were talking quite a bit about what was going on in this labor market and, more importantly, how this virus has completely shifted how we are looking at retirement. I mean, a lot of older people have written in and said they don't want to go back to work. This is hastening their decision making about retirement. So, if you're thinking about that and how you think about retirement, stay tuned. Here's more of our interview with Teresa Ghilarducci. How do you think this virus will impact the way we think about retirement? Before
Mm.
we went on the air, you and I were talking a little bit about, how do you conceive retirement? There's so much pressure on people and so much anxiety. So, I don't want to steal your thunder from your future book, but can we talk a little bit about how we think emotionally about retirement in light of what we've just gone through, or what we are still going through, I should say?
Jill, this is the project I'm most excited about in my life right now. Retirement has gotten a bad press in America. The conversation we're having would be laughable in most of the other world, where retirement is seen as an important part of human development. A period of time where, as an adult, you can control the pace and content of your time is the period of time as an adult where you can find out who you are as a person. When you're working, that luxury of knowing how you want to spend your time is not affordable for most of us. We have to pay attention to the needs of our employer or to our clients, or to the needs of the enterprise. And who we are as a human being is subordinated. That's just the life of a person in a market economy. But the fact that the rich, the middle class, and the poor alike have fought for Social Security, for pensions, for Medicare, is evidence of a basic human drive to have the reward at the end of your life to be able to figure out what your personhood is. So I think the virus certainly has brought mortality and morbidity to the forefront of all of our lives and gave us the sense that we should think about how we want to spend the rest of our lives. And people who are being pushed out of work have that question, it's very stressful, put in front of them. So I think it's important for Americans to realize that we have to stop the madness of being distinguished among the rich world as working more hours per day, more days per week, more weeks per year, and more years per lifetime than our colleagues in other rich countries. We have exceeded Japan and Germany as working the most. So if the virus makes Americans take stock of that relationship and demand a healthy retirement time, it would be good progress for human development. So I don't mean to sound so lofty, but I'm getting a lot of my data and evidence for this view from psychologists, gerontologists, philosophers, and anthropologists.
I mean, when you publish this book, you must come back. I find it fascinating. Of course, I'm no longer in practice, but as a CFP, when I was giving financial advice for 14 years, people would come in and say, "I want to retire. I want to retire. I want to retire." They retire, and then they're not happy. And certainly on the radio show and on the podcast, we hear from people who are targeting retirement, targeting retirement. No one's ever taught us how to retire before. So thinking about it and emotionally understanding that this is a whole new phase of your life is just fascinating to me. And it's a phase that can last for a long time.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In your life as an interviewer and when you worked counseling people, how did they approach retirement? With glee and confidence, or was fear a big factor?
Well, I would say it was both. I mean, there were sort of three generalized emotions that would come through. One was excitement, like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Like, we can, you would maybe deliver a financial plan that says, yes, Teresa, you can retire at age
Mhm.
66 and 6 months, just as you have planned. And so that would be like, wow, I've hit a milestone. So there's an excitement about it. There
Mhm.
were plenty of people who had great fear. What is this going to mean? Oh my God, I'm going to be home with my spouse all this time, or
Uh,
I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And this is really anxiety provoking, right? And I think there were certainly also a lot of couples where
Mm.
retirement meant different things. Like we could always be on the same page when we were both working, putting our heads down, getting the family educated, raising our kids, moving, right? The idea that one had a very different view than the other.
Oh, fascinating. So you had to reshape your own individual like teenagers do, right?
Absolutely.
That kind of fear and anxiety sounds like actually an adolescent rite of passage.
Yeah.
Who am I? What am I to do? But adolescents don't go into adulthood, as a couple. So that if the couple is an entity, they have to figure out that identity as well. That's fascinating. I don't think the psychology profession has caught up with this.
Mm.
This very important life event. We've got grief, right? We got grief down pat. Lots of literature and an industry around grief, but around transitions on identity, we don't have. And in America, we add financial fear on top of this. Really put older people behind the eight ball. And then there's also the fear of actually financial predation. You're going into a period of life where it's really important for you to handle your finances right when your ability to handle your finances may actually be on the decline.
Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Teresa in just a minute. You know what? If you've got a question about how to think about your retirement, maybe what you ought to do is go to our resource section, because there we've got links to different estimates. Whatever it is, you got to run the numbers. We know that much. So check it out, JillOnMoney.com, the resource section. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of a show or want to check out a past show, go to JillOnMoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And we are finishing up our interview with Teresa Ghilarducci. She is a super smart economist. She has been doing so much research about retirement, about the state of the labor market, and specifically focusing on how the retirement system really needs to be viewed, not just through our own lenses, but through the lens of policymakers. She wrote a book a while back trying to get policymakers to pay attention. It's very smart. And unfortunately, I think times are going to really necessitate a much more significant focus on these issues. In this part of the interview, we're going to be looking at how the idea of the behind the fire movement, that financial independence, retire early, may really find its roots in something else. It's not just a bunch of millennials or tech workers who said, I don't want to work. Perhaps there's something that's deeper that underlies this movement. Teresa Ghilarducci, our guest, thinks that's the case. Here's more of our interview with her. I think that what's fascinating about the idea of retirement is that it conjures up different things to different generations, right? And so I was very taken with this movement, the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. These young
Yeah,
kids who are
yeah.
saving, saving, saving. And, I could get into the financial independence part like whole hog. I love the idea of, you know, basically saving a bunch of money so you have opportunity in the future. But when they would talk about retire early and it's 30, 40 years old, I don't know, I giggled. I felt like, okay, boomer, because I said
Yeah.
to myself, well, what are you going to do with yourself? You're going to travel around the world and then what? But I think for a lot of other people, having colleagues, having a mission, having some goals, I think that is an essential aspect of who many of these people are, which is why they find retirement really difficult.
I really want to add something very completely different perspective on this, Jill. I view the fire movement and also the view to be financially independent as actually a worker power movement. If
Mm.
you're financially independent, then you can say to your boss, change this, change my hours. Don't make me work on weekends. Don't think because I have an email or a text that you can call me all the time, make my job more reasonable, pay me more. It's the take this job and shove it desire for wealth and independence.
Mm-hmm.
I feel these young people are saying, what you're doing to me at the workplace is too much. I can't imagine raising my family, being who I want to be with these kinds of work demands, because it goes back to the data that I told you about at the beginning, that Americans are working more hours per week, more weeks per year, more years per lifetime. And that young people want more of a balance, and they're not getting it from their employers. So if you're financially independent, you can have the ability to say, take this job and shove it. I view the wealth independence movement as not to absent themselves from work, but a desperate effort to try to make the workplace much more balanced. I see this with older people too. Older people had good pensions and a good retirement plan. They may actually like their jobs better. The jobs that they do get may actually pay a little bit more. I'm just finding a lot of older people are taking pretty bad jobs just because they don't have good retirement security. I actually think wealth accumulation, retirement security would make all workers better off, because it would actually require employers to provide a more healthy and better paid and better balanced job.
Do you think that this whole work from home part of our lives that's going on now, which is likely to extend into the
Yeah.
future, for the foreseeable future, for many of the white collar workers out there who are listening to this, is that bad news for workers' rights? Because on one level, I say it's great. You don't have to commute. Maybe there's more work from home stuff, but then you're always available. Like my
Yeah.
girlfriend and I, man, we starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there is email checking going on till 9:30 at night. So
Yeah.
that doesn't seem very healthy either.
Do you have more balance because you're working at home? I
I
don't.
never. I'm out of balance. I need an adjustment. I need an employment and lifestyle adjustment from some chiropractor out there.
I think that workers who are working at home have one common thing they say is good about it. I save on the commute. But
Hmm.
then the list of benefits from working at home stop there. I have some employees that they're graduate students or researchers. They're liking the 1 or 2 days where they can kind of be left alone to write. But that's a very rare job. I think employers are realizing that workers working at home on balance are less productive.
Hmm.
There are very few people who are working at home who are more productive than they were. It was a good stopgap. There may be a lot of workplaces that will allow people to save from their commute maybe 1 or 2 days a week. That might change permanently for some workers, but us coming together person to person at the workplace, I don't think will go away. But it's a big open question among labor economists. We're talking about it all the time, and we're diving into 765 occupations just to see what kind of shift there may be. But we don't think it'll be a wholesale shift away from the office.
Well, thank you so much to Teresa Ghilarducci. We will put a link up to her website, which is really interesting. She's got a book. It's called Rescuing Retirement, co-authored with Tony James. But I think her work is so interesting. She's quoted all over the place. We are so delighted that she joined us for this show. When we come back, we will take some more of your questions. So stay tuned. It's Jill on Money. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. We're broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios. Yes, we're virtual still. Capital One, this is banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Mark, I am just so happy that we were able to do our Teresa interview for our radio listeners. I love her, love her, love her, love her so much. So we're going to have her back on. She's awesome. Okay, here's a question before we finish up this hour. It is from Cindy. And here is her question. I'm 39 years old and I only have $14,000 in my 403B. My contribution is set at 13%. My question is, what amount or what percentage should I have it set at? Or should I seek another job that offers a 401k and just dedicate that to my retirement? Well, you have a 403B. Do you also have a pension? I feel like there's more going on here, Cindy. What else is going on? The way you should set your percentage is as high as you possibly can put it in. However, how much money you can afford to put in, the maximum is $19,500. That's how much you could do. Can you get that much in there? Whether you have a 403B or a 401k, it's not that the percentage and the amount that you put in is up to you. But if you're in a 403B and you also have a pension, that might make the decision a little bit easier. You might be able to absorb it a little bit more. Again, it has so much to do with your situation. We need to know more. How much do you make? What else is going on? If you have another job offer for some reason, I'd love to hear more about that as well. Amazing to get a new job in the pandemic, but I have heard it happening. So send us more information. We'd be happy to help you out. Okay, that is it. That is our number one. It's in the can now. And if you've got a financial question, feel free to send us an email. It's askjill@jillonmoney.com. Askjill@jillonmoney.com. When we return, we're going to have another guest. It's very exciting, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome back. It's hour number 2 of Jill on Money, and we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. Okay, we got another guest for you. You know why? Because Mark and I want to take a little bit of a break here. So we had some great interviews that we had in the can. We hadn't played them for one reason or the other. And this is one that we recorded about a year and a half ago or so. It's with the CEO of a company called Boxed.com. You know, it's basically an ability to go shopping online. I'm sure the business is booming since we spoke to him. His name is Che Huang, and I found him to be quite enchanting, I must say. So here is our interview with Che Huang, CEO of Boxed. What is your best career or financial decision you've made in your very young life?
So I have to say that I kind of cheated on this. And so I was ready for the question. And so I was thinking about it for quite a while. Most folks, because we are a startup and, I left my job kind of cold turkey years ago to start our first startup, even before Boxed. So most folks would say, best decision was getting up out of my desk, dropping the mic and throwing up the middle fingers at the managers and walking out. And that wasn't it. So that was fun, but I didn't do that, by the way. But it was a fun experience of my life. But I would say the best decision was actually to save a year of runway for myself, meaning that I had a year of savings in the bank where I didn't have to modify my lifestyle, didn't have to change the way I went out to eat, didn't have to move apartments for a full year so I could really give this startup thing a shot.
That's great. What's always amazing to me is to consider how many people don't have an adequate emergency reserve fund and how many founders have said to me like, oh man, I made bad decisions because I just didn't have any money.
Totally.
And that could be a big, huge problem if you are entrepreneurial.
So a lot of folks, when they quit their jobs to start their own businesses, like even if they raise money, they're like, okay, I have this much runway for my company. But a lot of them don't realize that like your personal runway is just as important in the beginning, because when you first found a company, you're kind of like the parent of that company, of a small child, meaning that if you don't survive, the child's not going to survive either. That changes later on as you get bigger. But in those early days, your runway is just as important as the company's.
So what led you to this place? You went to college. Like, what's your story?
So it was a long and winding story. So when my parents first came to the States, we moved to Ohio. Probably had brochures in Taiwan of like, come to beautiful Ohio. You know?
They were Taiwanese born.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they come here because they wanted a better life.
Yeah. So even before that, it's a little bit nuts. And my grandparents on my mother's side, one was Japanese, one was mainland Chinese. And
That's a big deal, that mixed marriage, right?
Yeah. And they met in the tail end of World War II. And they all ran off together. And then years later, they then ran off to Taiwan. So my mom's side of the family is that. My dad's side of the family had been in Taiwan for many generations. And then when I was about 1.5, they moved here to the States. And now family reunions are like the UN Security Council. So you have, it's just like...
Do you have certain things that are off limits talking about?
They generally... It's funny because even at my wedding, like the first 20, 30 minutes, it was just like icy. It was like silence. I was like,
your
wow.
wife's family's Japanese.
Japanese. So you had their side. You had kind of the mainland Chinese folks. You had the Taiwanese folks.
Oh, my God.
And then the alcohol comes out, and then it's like United Colors of Benetton.
Oh,
So,
isn't that nice?
Social lubricant is...
it's a good thing. And then where'd you go to college?
I went to Hopkins for college in Baltimore.
Uh-huh. And you're not pre-med.
Sometimes you feel like I'm sitting in these econ classes at Hopkins, and you get these pre-meds coming in for an easy A, and you're just like, listen, man, you're messing up the curve, okay? Stay out of this class.
Get back to Oregon.
But for Hopkins, it was... that was a little bit of it, but the reality was when we first moved to the States, and here's where we can tie it all together, we went from Ohio then to Baltimore for many years. And my mom was making minimum wage across the street from Johns Hopkins University Hospital at this Chinese restaurant as a cashier. And she would always see all these doctors come in and out, and it was always her dream. And I remember when she said, your kids are going to go to Hopkins one day.
Really?
So I always took that as I got older, I was like, you know what, screw this. Like, I can go to Hopkins. And even though I wasn't pre-med, that was a school that I applied to early and I got in. And to this day, it's one of the only times I've ever kind of seen my dad cry or about to cry. Was when we got in. So
that's so nice.
Yeah, meant a lot.
That's a great story.
Yep.
Okay, so you get out of Hopkins, what'd you do?
I made them proud by going to teach English in countryside Japan. So,
wow.
So this was 2003 when I graduated. So you're still kind of in that like post-first.com, like post-9/11 kind of downturn.
Yep.
And at that time, none of the banks were really recruiting at Hopkins. That's kind of changed since then. I remember going to on-campus interviews, and there was this program where they send you off into the countryside teaching English for a year or 3. And I was like, you know what? Let's go for it.
And so how long were you there?
I was there for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
So what was instructive about that, looking back? Like, what was the most important few lessons that you took from that experience in just managing people and being in a place where you're uncomfortable potentially?
I could name 3 huge life lessons that I learned there. First is that don't ever take kind of being in a position where you can just simply speak the language and speak what's on your mind for granted. After living in countryside Japan where not a lot of folks spoke English and it was a challenge to get, your faucet fixed or to even just order a meal, coming back to the States, I was like, like I'm on top of the world. I can do anything, Second was not being afraid speaking in front of crowds, because I was teaching in a middle school. And there's nothing more frightening than 30 middle schoolers that turn on you. And so now, I'm like, nothing's as bad as that, And then lastly, don't ever feel like you're wasting your time by taking a chance. So here's what I mean by that. After coming back from Japan, taught English, played Duck Duck Goose, traveled over Asia for 2 years. Most of my other friends were either going to business school at the time or med school, or starting to go from analyst to associate. Some were even thinking about where's my VP title at a big bank. So I was like, oh my gosh, I really wasted 2 professional years going there. As it turned out, when we started our first company, we had just no interest in funding us. But then we had some traction with our first game. We were developing mobile games for the iPhone at the time.
How'd you know how to do that?
I didn't. So I was on the business side of things. I knew how to play games and knew what I liked.
Okay.
But started with a bunch of high school friends. We couldn't really raise money until we got this inbound from Japan. So there was an inbound from one of the biggest gaming companies in Japan. So they said, our CEO is coming for an investor relations tour. Do you want to meet with her? So I said yes. So we go there, across this huge table, 10 bankers and 5 people from the company. We're sitting there and it was just not good, the first few minutes. But then I was like, I know how to break the ice. I speak a little Japanese. And then I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have said that because then they'll start to test you. But then we realized that the CEO of that company was not only one of the only founding female CEOs of a public company in Japan, one of the only now female baseball team owners in Japan, but one of the only public CEOs that grew up in the town that I taught English at.
Oh, my goodness. That is a weird coincidence and fantastic.
Yep. And after that, raised our first almost $1 million a few weeks later.
We'll get back to our interview with Che Huang in just a moment. During the break, why don't you do this? Go to JillOnMoney.com. That is our website, and you can listen to old shows that you might have missed. You can also subscribe to our sister broadcast. It's called Jill on Money. You can get it on Apple or Stitcher or Spotify, Radio.com, Google Play, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is a program that attempts to take the mystery out of your financial life. If you've got a question, maybe it's about your investments or your retirement or your estate planning, or maybe you're wondering how to pay for college, just send us an email. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. We are in the middle of an interview with a young CEO. His name is Che Huang, and the company is called Boxed, exploding in growth, obviously, as lots of grocery shopping taking place online. Here is the origin story of how Che started the company. Here's more of our interview.
Coming back, it's kind of what you said before. My parents were like, okay, enough of this teaching English. Doctor, banker, lawyer, pick one. And I'm like, well, it's too late to be a doctor. And, it's probably too late to inject myself into an analyst class somewhere as a bank. So, I took the LSAT and went to law school.
Oh, you did?
I did,
so you
yeah.
actually went to law school.
I
okay.
did. So went to law school, graduated, started my career on September 15th, 2008.
Oh, come on. The day of Lehman Brothers bankruptcy
That's
filing.
right. Yeah, I love that you know it.
Yes.
Yeah, 9 hours after they collapsed. Our firm was located in Morgan Stanley's building at that time, so 1585 Broadway.
Yeah.
And Lehman was a block over.
Yeah.
And so here I am, new suit, new shoes, walking to work with thousands of people streaming onto the street. I don't know if you remember that scene. Just
of course.
Like grown adults crying on the street. Just
I know people. I know a guy who lost $20 million on that day, and his entire net worth evaporated because he just sat on that Lehman stock forever, thinking that he was going to get bailed out by somebody. Not. So how long were you a lawyer?
I was there for a little over 2 years.
So you do that. You're never going to stay in that environment. You're like too normal.
Yeah.
Right?
to a certain extent, yeah. And after about 2 years, I was like, time to pull the ripcord.
Okay. And that's when you start your app business with your homies?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. So how long did that app business last?
It lasted...
How long did it take you to burn through that woman's $1 million?
That's a better question. That's a very insightful question. So we had almost no funding in the beginning. So if you count that aside, we went from raising that first kind of almost $1 million to Zynga acquiring us in a little under 11 months.
Wait a minute. So she got bailed out. She made
We
money.
did all right.
Did you made a few shekels?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So you did well. At that point, are you a Zynga employee?
Yeah, afterwards.
For how long?
We were there for a little under 2 years again.
Did you have any student loan debt at that time?
Yeah, absolutely.
And did you pay it all off?
Most of it, but then the rest of it's like 1%. And I was like, this
okay,
smart money decision
right?
not to.
Okay, so that's good. So you paid off the higher interest, and you put some money in the bank.
That's
You
right.
worked at Zynga. You made a decent salary.
Yep.
Was it fun?
It was one of the most educational experiences of my life, but it was also one of the most heart-wrenching.
Why?
Because you go from extreme kind of independence, being your own boss, living the dream, to then sitting back in an office and working for the man again. And you're like, wait a minute. But also
what were
to
you
see,
doing?
So we ended up forming their New York mobile gaming studio. So we were just like a factory of games. So the heart-wrenching part was, we IPO'd at 10, it went up to $16, and then within 3 quarters we were trading at $1.85 or something like that. So I never went to business school, but I feel like that was my hard knocks MBA, and I realized a lot, and I learned so much.
Were you able to sell after the IPO, or were your shares tied up?
Most of our shares were tied up. And so it was really tough to see it. You're like,
so did you do that game like my net worth on paper, and you start tracking it, and then all of a sudden it goes the other direction? You're like, I'm never looking at this again.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so I remember, because I was running the studio at the time, and everyone was on like Yahoo Finance and Google Finance, like refreshing the stock price. And then I got up in front of everyone. I was like, next person that I see on Google or Yahoo Finance, it's not going to end well for you. And then I go back to my desk. I'm like, Google Finance. I'm like, where is it? Where is
not
it?
to. It really is hard not to.
Yep.
I get that. So after the Zynga experience, what happened next?
We felt like mobile game developers had this really deep intuition about how mobile customers behaved. And so could we take that knowledge and apply it to a new and bigger industry? Let's take even a bigger shot. And so the co-founders left. We all took some time off and then came back together to make Box. So we wanted to take our mobile knowledge and go after consumer packaged goods and food retail.
So what is Boxed? And I'll tell everyone why I fell in love with Che in a second.
So Boxed is an online warehouse club. So, you take all the big things that you could buy at, Costco, BJ's, and Sam's Club, except, all the heavy stuff we deliver right to your door, 2 days or less for 90+% of our customers, free shipping for 97% of our customers, and overnight shipping for 43% of our customers across the country. So it's kind of like bringing that warehouse club experience to your pocket.
For you, when you first started, the barriers of entry are low, but the barrier for success is kind of high because you are basically competing against Amazon and everyone else. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I look back and I just think, what were we thinking? In a lot of ways, geez, I mean, we're a little bit naive, probably a lot of stupid, and went after it. And just by sheer luck, I feel like the tailwinds of change within food retail and within consumer packaged goods kind of blew in our favor. And by year 3, year 4, and now year 5, we're at a decent scale in a rapidly changing industry.
And how's that changing? Like, if drill down to the consumer, like if I want to get a bunch of paper towels and I go on Amazon Prime and I click, how is that different than my experience with Boxed?
So on Amazon Prime and Amazon in general, you don't really get like the large items that you would see in a Costco or BJ's. You get bigger ones, but not the full pack size, and a lot of times not the real value. Like generally, if you shop with Boxed, we don't lead with price, but you will save money over Amazon shopping with Boxed on the unit price. We also don't make you kind of build this weird box like Prime Pantry does. You have to add the right amount of stuff, and if you add too much, you get hit with another $5.99. You add too little, you're like, oh man, I had to pay shipping on this. So we also don't ask you to do or play that game.
So who are your customers, generally speaking?
We're a wholesaler, so a large portion of our customers are actually B2B customers.
Really?
Take small to medium-sized businesses. It's now in vogue to not only provide coffee, but snacks as well. But once you get to like 30, 40, 50 people in your office, it's unfair to let the office manager know or put it on their plate to go to Costco with their own car and to buy snacks for the company. But you're also too small for, say, a Cisco to come and cater for you, or Sodexo. So that's been a niche for us as well. The other folks are folks who don't have the time, the means, or the patience, regular consumers, to go to a warehouse club.
Yeah. I went to, Mark is raising his hand. Mark, have you ever been to a warehouse club? Never? That's amazing.
You don't enjoy the lines, Mark?
I went, listen, I bought a house almost 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should join one of these warehouse clubs. I can't remember which one I used, but one of them, whatever. I was the worst warehouse shopper in the world because I literally would go in there and like meander around and be like, oh, yeah, maybe I do need that. Like, it was so bad and overwhelming. But if you are looking at the business going forward, where do you think the growth is derived?
Very good question. So B2B has been a real good growth engine for us. Even if you think about large companies, we're starting to go after and win some of those contracts. Even here at CBS, I mean, probably no one asked, but where does the coffee, where does the creamer come from? And so absolutely B2B, but also consumers as well, because the CAGR of the entire industry, the compound annual growth rate of the whole industry is just at a rate where even if we do nothing, we'd grow at a pretty decent clip. You asked something before about like what has changed in those last 5 years to enable our growth. Well, 5 years ago, we used to get emails all the time saying, you guys are psychotic. I'm not putting my credit card in a mobile device, let alone buy grocery on a mobile device.
Wow.
That was 5 years ago. But now it's like, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I get my spring water and my paper towels delivered instead of schlepping it home?
That is so interesting. We'll get back to our interview with Che Huang, the CEO of Boxed.com, in just a second. Hey, you know what you could do during the break that would be super smart? How about if you start to check out all the great resources that we have on our website? Just go to JillOnMoney.com. And if something tickles your fancy, you can always send us an email. We've got a contact button right there on the website, JillOnMoney.com. Okay, we'll be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. Here's the visual for you guys. I now have 2 small dogs sitting on my lap because they were barking uncontrollably, and they would only calm down when I put them on my lap. So, I'm trying to be super focused on you, and I am super focused on you, but I'm also holding the dogs at the same time. We are rebroadcasting an interview that we conducted with Che Huang. We did this interview back in January of 2019 after I met him. I was so interested in the way that he managed his employees. It felt so different than so many of the other CEOs that I had met. And maybe it's his age, maybe it's his personality. I don't know, but it's pretty cool. So this is the CEO of Boxed.com, Boxed, Boxed, and his name is Che Huang. This is the end of our interview with him. Che Huang here on the Jill on Money Show. How many employees do you have now?
If you count fulfillment center folks, we're probably into between 400 to 500 on any given week.
Which is unbelievable. It's huge. And the fulfillment center people, are they full-time employees or are they contractors?
More and more now. So we offer, when you generally start as a temp, but right there on the cafeteria tables, same ones that I dine at, you see just a path towards W-2 and what you get if you work hard and you actually become a full-time employee. And that's stock options, benefits, all this other stuff that we get.
And 401k after a certain period of time?
We don't match across the whole board, but you do get the ability to.
Use it. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that you talked about was really trying to manage how the voice of the people who work for you is really important. So would you mind telling the story about the pink tax and how you responded to that?
We have a wonderfully robust and wonderfully strong group of women that work at Boxed, very vocal about all sorts of issues, ones that affect them, ones that don't affect them. Mm-hmm. One morning when I was coming to work, I was trying to get to my desk, didn't have my morning coffee yet, and Natasha Mehta out there, she's listening to this, and she's like, yes, that was me, stopped me and said, what are we going to do about the pink tax? And I'm like, sorry, I was not this activist at that time where I was like, what are we going to do, Natasha? I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, let me get to my desk, and then let's talk about it. But even a lot of women don't know this, but in over 30 states, women are still taxed on fem care products like pads and tampons as if it's a luxury good item, which is nuts. Because, I've passed it through my own BS filter, and I was like, okay, if my wife called and said, hey, hon, can you bring home some pads on the way home? And if I said, hey, have you seen the GDP report? It's not that, the economy's not that strong, but next month, I promise, we'll go for the luxury goods.
Right, that's a luxury item.
Yeah, exactly. There's no, she wouldn't let me back in the apartment. And
rightly so.
And so how come those items are taxed and in some states, like condoms are not? It just doesn't make sense. And so from that period on, we started this program called Rethink Pink. And so if we have to unfairly collect a sales tax from you as a customer, we'll rebate it back in savings.
Because you have to. If you're doing business in that state, that's state law, you have to comply with that.
Absolutely. So we collect the sales tax, but we give you a discount so as if you're not paying the sales tax out of your own pocket. If there's a pink razor that costs 50% more or sometimes 100% more than a blue razor, we'll also lower the price so it's the same price as a blue razor. And so the women of Vox now fly all over the country testifying in front of state legislatures trying to get the pink tax abolished.
That's a good story. Okay, the other thing that you talked about was you have a unique policy about family leave. Can you talk about that? Because that also, I came back here and told that story over and over. So people were like, I want to work there. So why don't you explain what your policy is?
So we're trying to scale these as fast as possible, even for, leave, maternity and paternity leave. It's unlimited, paid unlimited. Here's the great thing when you treat folks like adults, generally there isn't abuse of the programs.
Well, that was what was interesting because when you first talked about that, we had a phone call and you told me this and I'm like, it's unpaid, right? And you said, no, it's paid. And so talk about some of those results when you say to people, take as much time as you need. Now, what have you found?
We found that the shortest leave that anyone took, maternity leave, was little over a month.
Okay, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, that was so quick that I was like, you should take more time.
Yeah, she's like, nah.
Yeah. It's like, have you ever had? Yeah. I need adult interaction. So, the longest was 10 months.
But the most common, like the median, what would you say that is?
Probably like 4 to 5 months or so.
And so you're giving these people time off. They're getting their families on track, but they're coming back, and you've already invested a lot in them.
Yep.
Do your investors think this is a crazy policy?
Yep.
Do they push back on you a lot?
Quite a bit. What I always tell them is that there's certain things you can't, that are not only the right things to do, but also that benefit the company without being a specific line on a P&L. I guess in these respects, you can kind of say, it shows back up in kind of when you recruit folks, getting great talent, or by not having potentially as much kind of turnover.
Right. I have to imagine that retention is really good because of this. I treat you nicely, so you come back.
I hope the folks listening to this don't think, it's just their policy is just to give everyone the stars and the moon and to attract folks that way. That's not our policy. Our policy, because we also have strict policies for other stuff. And
like
so,
what?
25% time, for example. So we do not have a policy like a lot of other startups that, like 25% of your time you can work on your own side project or you can do this or that. And
I don't get that.
Yeah.
I'm old, but I don't get that.
So, we're like, we pay you to be here.
Right.
We love your skill set. You have to focus your professional energies on this.
And you also said like the hours, like you basically said, hey, if everyone in the warehouse has to get in this time, like the rest of the professional staff, like get your butts in your seats by that time.
Totally. So it was a problem where we had kind of the office employees kind of strolling in 15 minutes after they should be, 30 minutes. But the fulfillment center employees, they don't get a pass.
No.
You get written up if you're 5-10 minutes late. A few of those strung together, then you won't have a job.
When you hire in a warehouse, are you paying $15 an hour? Are you paying whatever the minimum wage is? Like, what's your game plan on that?
Absolutely not minimum wage. It's very hard to make a living off of minimum wage. So definitely not minimum wage, but it depends on, now that we have fulfillment centers all over the country, it depends on where you are. So some you'll start at, 12, 13, others you'll start, elsewhere, but never minimum wage.
Thanks so much to Che Huang. I know it's been a while since I spoke to him, but boy, what an inspirational story. What an interesting leader as well. We're going to get back to your questions when we return. If you're thinking about something's on your mind about your financial life, send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of a show or want to check out a past show, go to jillonmoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. And we're getting back to your questions. Remember, if you have something on your mind, you're worrying about your money, anything we can help you out with, just shoot us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. That's what Ryan did. And here is the email. Hi, Jill. You kindly answered our question before, but our circumstances have changed and we need your help and advice. My wife, my 5-month-old, and I live in a house that is experiencing flooding now, up to twice a year. Oh my God, that's terrible. The flooding is severe, writes Ryan. The garage and bottom floor, technically the basement, are below grade level of the street. Now, the street has been flooding due to the storm sewer system not being able to keep up with recent rainfall. Oh my God, this is horrible. When the street flooding goes over the curb grade level, it spills down our depressed driveway. It floods the garage and the finished basement, and we get up to, get this, gang, 16 inches of water. It has happened 4 times since 2018. This was happening when we messaged you before, but it happened again and worse. And we found out that based on our state's Supreme Court rulings, the city is immune from paying for any damages due to a failing storm sewer system. The city is dragging its feet in doing anything. And we've been told it could be, you ready for this, gang? 10 to 15 years before it could be fixed. It's become a rough situation for us. The last time it flooded, we had to leave our home for 2 weeks in the middle of the COVID pandemic because it was unlivable for our baby. Here are the 4 solutions. 1, build a sandbag wall and wait it out for 15 years. Not really willing to do that. That's a terrible, forget that. I don't even want to even think about that. 2, sell the house as is, get out. 3, wall up the garage doors, make it waterproof, backfill the driveway, re-pour the driveway, which could prevent any future flooding. Over time, convert garage to a finished basement living space. Then we will live there permanently. 4, wall up the garage doors, make it waterproof, backfill the driveway, re-pour the driveway, then save money and move in 10 years and try to rent the first house. Oh my God. Okay, here we got the facts. Ready, gang? We paid $142,500 for the house. They owe $104,000. Home value without flooding, $200 to $217. Home value with the flooding issue, $115,000. Money we have lost or spent due to flooding, between $12,000 to $14,000, not covered by insurance. All the realtors said our house would lose 20 grand in value if we were to wall up the garage. Everyone agrees that will actually drop the home value for sure. I'm exhausted from this. I don't know about you, Mark. Okay, for number 3, the walling up the garage would cost $37,000 to $55,000. Step 4, $25,000 to make it so our house doesn't flood. Here's the finances: 40 grand in savings. 11 grand has been saved for the next car purchase. All right, so let's say 30. Single family. Okay, what else do we have here? We'd like to move at some point. What should we do? Invest another 25 in the house, accept the loss, stay, invest slowly. And then he sent us the images, which is insanity. Oh my God. Mark, why did you, how did you come up with such a long time to decide what to do? I know exactly what I would do. What do you think you should, what would you do? Totally. That's it. Mark said he like kind of went back and forth. He was trying to run the numbers. I, of course, am much more split second and aggressive on this. Sell this house and get the heck out. Pay the bill and move on. Get out. This is the quintessential throwing good money after bad. Unfortunately, sometimes you have these mistakes that are made and, you wish you'd gone back. You wish you'd done something else. I just spoke to a guy who said, his inspector didn't show certain things. It just shows you that, you've got to bring an engineer into an inspection. I happen to have a brother-in-law who's an engineer, and he's found things when I've gone to homes and done inspections that I know that wouldn't have come up. You've got to hire your own. It's not just termites, it's structural. all of these things can come back and bite you in the butt. And it is so important that you take care of this. I'm so upset for this guy, Mark, because I do feel like, not that anyone screwed him, but maybe with some more research, they would have avoided this. It's hard to say. But I say sell the house, accept the loss, move on. It kind of reminds me of that guy from the journalist who wrote his book, and he had that horrible apartment where, some of these things, this can cause a lot of long-term financial damage. I think short-term, bite the bullet and get the heck out of there. Find an affordable house. And if you need to rent for a little while, then rent. Get back on your feet. Make sure you've got your emergency reserve, get your new car, get your baby out of there, get your sanity back. Get your sanity back, Ryan. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. It's horrible. It's just horrible. You guys got to see these pictures. I would put them up. It's not fair, but it's an insane amount of flooding. So, terrible. Terrible, terrible. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money. Anyone else living in a flood zone? Got to be so careful. Anywhere near the water, please. If you've got a financial question, send us an email. It's askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. All right, isn't it nice to hear from a young CEO? He's maybe not so young, but he is a youngish CEO, especially compared to me, and hear how he views the world differently than the old guard. It's actually nice and enlightening. So thanks again, Che Huang, great guy. Before we finish the show, let's take one more question from you. If you've got a question that's burning, keeping you up at night, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. This is from Jim, who listens to us on KDKA Radio in Pittsburgh, I believe the oldest radio station in the country. Okay. Now, this morning, he says, you said discontinue 401k payments to pay off debt. My wife and I will retire in the next couple of years, and I don't want to retire with a mortgage. Instead of discontinuing 401k payments, would it be the same to systematically make withdrawals? Either way, we're going to have to pay the tax. Thank you, Jim. Jim, I think I was talking more about, how we think about paying off other kinds of debt, not a mortgage. Gosh, I'd like to know a lot more about you before I could sign on to this. Again, you're working now, so maybe your tax bracket is higher than it will be in the future. So perhaps delaying those withdrawals actually makes more tax sense. And, when you think about it, using a retirement account, paying the tax, and then paying off your mortgage also means that you're depleting your liquidity. So what that means is that, as you get older, you might need some money and you're not replenishing these assets anytime soon. So I think it's important to really consider whether or not you can afford to not just pay the dollar amount off, but whether you can afford to lose that liquidity. Let me know if that makes sense to you. If you've got follow-up questions, keep us posted. Okay, that's it. That's the program. Thanks again for listening. We really do appreciate it. Remember to please wash your hands and wear your masks and maintain your physical distancing and try to do something nice for somebody else. We'll talk to you next week. Any questions? Go to our website, jillonmoney.com. Have a great weekend.